can masturbation change the quality of your orgasms? Not just how often you have them, but how intense they are, how satisfying they feel, and whether you can have them at all with a partner. I'm Dr. Rena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon, and a brand new study just gave us some fascinating answers, especially if you're over 50, because it turns out your solo sex life and your partnered sex life are far more connected than most people realize. And what the research found might completely change how you think about both. But before we dive in, if you're someone who's been dealing with erectile dysfunction, I want you to know I created my erectile mastery course specifically for you. It's everything I walk my own patients through in my urology practice. The real causes, the proven lifestyle changes that actually work, and when and how to seek treatment. Check out the course at learn.renamalikmd.com/erectile mastery. So back to the research. The research team wanted to ask a very simple question. Does the way you experience masturbation affect your orgasms during sex with a partner? Basically, can your solo sex experiences, how often you have them, how you feel about them, how intensely you experience them, predict whether you're going to have satisfying orgasms in a relationship? The answer, it turns out, is yes, but the way it matters is actually different for men and women. And the difference, that's where it gets really interesting. So this study was published in 2022, and they recruited 546 Spanish sexually active adults who were between the ages of 50 and 83 with an average age of 55, about half men and half women. They basically completed anonymous surveys online, which asked them when they started masturbating, how often they do it, what their attitudes are towards masturbation, meaning do they feel shame or guilt about it, how often they want to masturbate or what's their desire for it, and what is the quality of their orgasms during masturbation, how intense, how satisfying, and how pleasurable are they. And then they looked at how that connected to satisfaction and orgasms during partnered sex. So the real question they were asking is there a connection between what happens when you're alone and what happens when you're with someone? So what did they find? Men started masturbating earlier in life than women. On average, men were age 13 when they started masturbating compared to 18 for women, which is really not surprising to me. Women reported more shame and guilt around masturbating, particularly earlier in life, and men masturbated more frequently than women, even in the older age population. But here's where it gets interesting. Men had more negative attitudes towards masturbation overall than women did. They were more likely to think that masturbation is immature or wrong, but they did it more often. Women actually had more positive attitudes towards it, but masturbated less often. And that's really important to understand, guys. Attitude and behavior are not the same thing. How often you masturbate is not nearly as important as what you think about the practice of masturbating. And guys, I get this question all the time, how much is too much? And it doesn't matter. It's how you think about it and how it affects your life. Now, interestingly, men, when they masturbated more frequently, they reported having more difficulty reaching orgasm with their partners. However, it's not that simple. The researchers think that it might be because people are using masturbation to compensate for difficulties they're already experiencing with orgasms during partnered sex. So because they're not having great orgasms during sex, they're masturbating more often. But the masturbation itself isn't causing the problem. Rather, it's a response to the problem. Now, in terms of orgasms, women reported more intense orgasms during masturbation than men. And the theory here is that women tend to feel orgasms more emotionally and full-bodied compared to men who tend to feel it as mostly a genital sensation. Not to say it's not good, it's just not as full-bodied. And this brings us to the next point, is how did orgasms affect relationships? So for men, two things predicted orgasmic function in relationships. So age. Older men experienced more difficulty with orgasms, which unfortunately is a physiologic reality. As anyone ages, their nerve endings age too. So the same sensations that you used to feel don't send the same intense signals to the brain because the nerves are not getting the same stimulation. Number two is negative attitudes. So if they had more negative attitudes towards masturbation, they had worse orgasmic function. And this is likely because the shame itself was interfering with sexual performance, not the act of masturbation, but how they felt about masturbation. And as I mentioned earlier, men who masturbated more frequently had more difficulty with orgasms. For women, however, it was completely different. Frequency had nothing to do with orgasmic satisfaction, but how their orgasms felt in terms of emotional quality during masturbation did matter. So women who saw their solo orgasms as elating, fulfilling, emotionally rich, those women had significantly better orgasmic function and satisfaction with their partners. So this suggests that practicing masturbation, especially for women, and experiencing pleasurable, intense orgasms during it might actually train your body and mind for a better sexual response with a partner. In terms of men, but also for women, if you have negative attitudes towards masturbation, that's going to make it harder for you to have satisfying orgasms with your partner. So ideally, you want to look at masturbation as something that is normal and healthy rather than shameful or something you have to rush through. And unfortunately, this is how we're trained as kids. If you are masturbating, you're sort of hiding in your room or hiding in the shower where you don't want to get caught. And so you're trained your body to rush through masturbation. But if you take your time and enjoy masturbation as a means to achieve pleasure rather than something to rush through, you might actually have better sex. And guys, I've talked about masturbation on this channel a lot. And of course, there are a few ways that masturbation can potentially negatively impact sexual function, but that's far and few between. Largely, it's normal and healthy to have orgasms either by yourself or with a partner. And so for some people, masturbation is the only way they're going to have an orgasm. In general, I think everyone could work on slowing down and actually being present during solo sexual experiences. Think about it. Are you always rushing? Are you distracted when you're masturbating? Or are you treating it as a purely mechanical sensation? Because as I mentioned, this research suggests that the emotional richness of how you experience pleasure alone actually transfers to how you experience pleasure with a partner. So we don't think about your solo sex life or your masturbation as something that's completely different from sex with a partner. It's essentially practice for the real thing. Another really important point that this study brings up is that masturbation affects people very differently. As you could see in the study, there were different predictors for men and women. So just because someone says something about their individual experience about masturbation, or they think it's bad or harmful, or it doesn't make them feel good, it doesn't mean that that's how you will feel, and that's not something you have to ascribe to. Listen to your own body. And guys, I say this all the time, but everyone deserves pleasure. And solo sex is a great, safe way to experience it. Also, this study focused on adults over the age of 50. And I love that because there's no expiration date for sexuality. Absolutely, you can have pleasurable and enjoyable sex life as long as you have the right information, the tools, and if you need help. Guys, I really hope this helped you. If this gave you something useful, please subscribe. It's an easy, zero-cost way to support our content, and come back every week for more science-backed education about your sexual and urologic health. And as always, remember to take care of yourself because you're worth it.